You are standing at the base of the largest structure in the Western Hemisphere. The year is 1487. The city of Tenochtitlan, built on a lake, home to more people than London or Paris, is roaring around you. Copal smoke burns your eyes. The crowd is so dense you cannot lift your arms. And at the top of the stairs above you, a man you know by name is about to die. You fed him. You clothed him. You spent 3 months preparing him for this exact moment, and now, in the firelight and the noise, you are searching his silhouette for one thing, some signal of whether he is afraid. You cannot tell. You don't know if it matters. This is not a war. This is not chaos. This is the most organized event the most powerful empire in Mesoamerica has ever staged, and it will not end today. Tenochtitlan, 1487, the dedication of the Templo Mayor. And what you are watching is not barbarism, it is a machine running exactly as designed. The eagle warrior standing at the base of those stairs was not a criminal, he was not a sadist. He was an elite soldier at the peak of his civilization, watching the culmination of everything his rank, his training, and his cosmology had prepared him for. His stillness in that crowd was not guilt. What it actually was, that answer will reframe everything you think you're watching right now. But first, the facts. If you want the history they don't put in the textbooks, the documented, excavated, undeniable truth beneath the myths, subscribe now. Every week, we go deeper. At its height, in 1487, Tenochtitlan held between 200,000 and 300,000 inhabitants. That made it larger than any city in contemporary Europe. The Aztec Empire, the triple alliance of Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan, controlled a tribute network stretching across central Mexico, extracting cotton, cacao, feathers, jade, and human labor from dozens of subordinate polities. This was not a primitive society operating on instinct. It was a bureaucratic state with written records, ranked military orders, an agricultural surplus economy, and a legal system. The Codex Mendoza, a pictorial manuscript compiled shortly after the conquest from existing Aztec administrative sources, documents the tribute system in precise, ledger-like detail. Warrior ranks were tracked. Ritual calendars were scheduled. This civilization kept records the way empires keep records, because the machine required accountability. The dedication of the expanded Templo Mayor under the ruler Huitzilopochtli is among the most documented events in pre-Columbian history. Indigenous sources, filtered through Spanish chroniclers who had every reason to emphasize the horror, recorded somewhere between 20,000 and 80,000 deaths over 4 days. Modern scholars contest the upper range, but not the scale and not the structure. Eduardo Matos Moctezuma's excavations at the Templo Mayor site beginning in 1978 uncovered offering caches, carved monuments, and bone evidence across multiple construction phases. The physical record confirms what the written record describes. This was not a single event. It was a continuous institution, operating across generations, becoming more elaborate with each reign. The horror is confirmed. The evidence is solid. But the question the evidence cannot answer on its own is this: how does a society of 300,000 people look at a structure built for this purpose and call it sacred? How does an entire civilization agree, without apparent coercion, that this is not only acceptable, but necessary? The answer begins with the sun. The Aztecs did not believe the sun rose because it had always risen. They believed it rose because they made it rise, every single day. The cosmological system at the heart of Aztec civilization held that the current world, the fifth sun, was not guaranteed. The 4 suns before it had each been destroyed. This one had been purchased at the beginning of time by the gods themselves, who gathered at Teotihuacan and threw themselves into a fire so that the new sun would have the blood debt it needed to move. The universe, from its first moment, ran on sacrifice. The gods had paid first. Humanity was continuing the installment plan. The Nahuatl term was chalchihuatl, precious water, the euphemism the priests used for human blood. It was not dramatic language, it was technical language, the kind engineers use when describing what a machine requires to function. Without chalchihuatl, the sun would stall in the sky, crops would fail, the world, for the fifth and final time, would end. This was not metaphor. Inside Aztec cosmology, this was physics. The ritual calendar, the Tonalpohualli, ran 260 days, interlocking with the 365-day solar calendar to produce a 52-year cycle. Each day carried a deity, a specific cosmic weight, a specific demand. Different festivals required different offerings: warriors for the solar gods, women for agricultural deities, children for Tlaloc, the rain god who would only accept the tears of the young to bring water to the fields. The system was not spontaneous, it was scheduled. It ran the way a government budget runs: departments, line items, annual obligations. The most disturbing thing about Aztec sacrifice is not that it was monstrous, it is that it was reasonable. It was the logical conclusion of a coherent set of premises, followed with complete intellectual consistency. If you accept the premises, and every institution of Aztec life was designed to ensure that you did, then the priests at the top of the Templo Mayor were not killers. They were engineers performing essential maintenance on the infrastructure of reality. That is what the ego warrior believed, completely, without doubt. Which raises the question every scholar who studies this system eventually has to confront, a question that does not have a comfortable answer. If the system was internally rational, if its theology was coherent, if its population upheld it without recorded mass resistance, then where did the people come from? Who filled the altar on the day of the dedication 20,000 times over in 4 days? The answer is not what you might expect. The Aztec Empire did not simply conquer neighbors and drag survivors to the capital. That would have been, by their own theological standards, insufficient. The sun did not want prisoners of war. It wanted warriors, men of spiritual and martial quality, taken alive in fair combat, whose deaths would carry the proper cosmic weight. For that, you needed a very specific kind of war, one that had been running on schedule for decades before 1487, one that the eagle warrior had trained his entire life to fight. A war whose entire purpose was not to destroy the enemy, but to keep him alive long enough to climb those stairs. The flower wars were not accidents of history, they were appointments. Xochitl, the Nahuatl term, translates loosely as flowery war, though the name carries none of the softness that English suggests. These were formalized, semi-scheduled conflicts fought on agreed borders between the Aztec Triple Alliance and neighboring polities, most consistently the Tlaxcalans, the Huexotzinca, the Cholulans. Both sides sent warriors, both sides understood the objective. You were not there to take ground, you were not there to kill, you were there to collect. The eagle warrior had trained for this since adolescence. Years of instruction in the Kalmikak, the elite priestly and warrior school, had built one specific skill above all others, the ability to incapacitate a man without ending him. The Macuahuitl, the obsidian-edged war club, was designed with this in mind: devastating enough to drop a man, controllable enough not to kill him by accident. Taking a captive in single combat was not considered equal to killing in battle. It was considered superior. A kill proved strength. A living capture proved mastery. A warrior's entire social position was indexed to this. First capture, a change in dress, new privileges, recognition. 3 captures, entry into the elite orders, the eagle warriors, the jaguar warriors. More captures, proximity to the ruler, land grants, exemption from tribute. The entire Aztec military hierarchy was, in its deepest structure, a supply chain for the temple. Now, here is the detail that reframes the geography of the empire itself. Tlaxcala, the Aztecs' most consistent flower war opponent, was never conquered. The Aztec Triple Alliance had the military capacity to absorb it. They chose not to. Modern scholars examining the political structure of the empire, drawing on both indigenous-authored chronicles and the post-conquest accounts of Alvarado Tezosomoc, have concluded that Tlaxcala was deliberately maintained as an independent entity. A conquered Tlaxcala would provide tribute. An unconquered Tlaxcala provided something the theological economy valued more, a continuous source of high-quality warrior captives, generation after generation.
The Aztec Empire, in a very precise sense, was farming its enemies, keeping them strong enough to fight, close enough to reach, institutionally necessary. The eagle warrior did not think of it this way. He thought of the man across from him as an opponent worthy of the sun. When he brought him down, when the weight of the man hit the earth and the fight was over, he did not feel like a predator. He felt like a priest at the beginning of a very long ceremony. Because that is exactly what he was. He looked at the Tlaxcalan fighter beneath him, breathing hard, not yet understanding what surviving this fight would mean, and he made the formal declaration that Sahagun's indigenous informants later recorded in precise detail. Words that acknowledged the captive's warrior quality. Words that established what came next. He was taking him home, and for the next 3 months he would treat this man in a way that no Spanish observer who witnessed such treatment ever fully understood, with a combination of ceremony, provision, and deliberate preparation that looked, from the outside, almost like kindness. The practice was called Ixipla, divine embodiment. For major ceremonies, specific captives were not simply held and processed. They were selected, transformed, and elevated. Dressed in the regalia of the deity they were chosen to represent, given attendance, fed well, deliberately, carefully well, allowed to move through the city, venerated by citizens who encountered them in the streets, because the person walking toward them was not a prisoner. The person walking toward them was the god, temporarily housed in human form. The theological logic was precise. The god required a vessel to complete the ceremonial cycle. The vessel required preparation proportional to the deity's importance. You could not offer a neglected, diminished vessel to a god whose function sustained the agricultural calendar or the movement of the sun. The offering had to be worthy. The preparation was not mercy, it was quality control. Duran records that some Ixipla were given companions in the weeks before the ceremony, that they were permitted pleasures appropriate to the divine status they embodied. And then he records something that no amount of theological framing makes comfortable. As the ceremony approached, some wept. When their weeping was observed, attendants were instructed to respond in a specific, documented way. In Duran's own account, drawn directly from informants who were present, the instruction was to play music louder so the people passing would not hear. The music played louder. Hold that detail. Sit with what it implies. Because what it implies is that somewhere inside the institution, inside the priests who gave the instruction, inside the attendants who followed it, there was an acknowledged awareness that the sounds coming from the Ixipla were sounds the public theology could not absorb. The system knew what it was doing. It chose deliberately to keep that knowledge from the crowd. This is the boundary the documentary cannot resolve for you, because the question it raises is not whether some captives suffered.
The physical evidence, the written record, and elementary human psychology confirm that they did. The question is what the weeping tells us about the line between belief and coercion inside a system this total. A system so thoroughly embedded in every institution, every relationship, every cosmological premise a person had been given since childhood, that resistance was not merely dangerous, it was, within the available vocabulary of the universe, spiritually incoherent. Now return to the eagle warrior, sitting across from his captive weeks before the ceremony. The captive is eating. They are speaking in the formal register Sahagun's informants recorded with striking specificity. The warrior addresses the captive as "my beloved son." The captive is instructed to address the warrior as "my beloved father." This is not sentiment. It is a codified social-religious relationship recognized in Aztec custom with specific obligations on both sides. The warrior is telling his captive what is coming. He is not hiding it. He believes with complete sincerity that he is delivering the man toward one of the most desirable fates the universe offers: transformation, cosmic function, an afterlife accompanying the sun itself. Within Aztec theology, dying in sacrifice did not mean obliteration, it meant elevation. Death in battle or on the altar guaranteed a specific luminous afterlife, rebirth as a hummingbird or butterfly, 4 years accompanying the solar journey. Death by disease or old age sent the soul somewhere considerably darker. The warrior's stillness at the base of the temple was not guilt. It was the composed face of a man who genuinely believed in his bones that he had done his captive a profound and irreversible service. That realization is more unsettling than cruelty would have been. Cruelty is legible. This is something else entirely.
Huitzil did not build the expanded Templo Mayor quietly. He built it as a statement that every ruler in Mesoamerica was required to witness. The 1487 dedication was imperial theater at a scale the continent had never seen. Rulers from across the empire were invited, some as honored guests, some as recently subjugated tributaries who understood that attendance was not optional. The message required no translation. This empire controls the cosmic machinery. Tribute flows here, or the sun stops. The ceremony was not separate from political power. It was political power, dressed in feathers and firelight, and the organized movement of thousands of people through a choreography rehearsed for months. The logistics alone reveal the scale of the institution. Priests trained for years in specific ceremonial roles, each position in the ritual sequence assigned and practiced like military formation. The processional routes through the city were mapped. The Tzompantli, the great skull rack standing in the ceremonial precinct, already held the physical evidence of every previous ceremony, generations of them displayed in full public view. Citizens passed it daily. Traders navigated the market around it. Children grew up in its shadow and learned, as children learn everything, that it was simply part of the landscape of the world they had been born into. It was not hidden behind walls. It was not confined to restricted priestly spaces. It stood where everyone could see it, because visibility was the point. The Tzompantli was not a record of violence. It was a monument to maintenance. A public accounting of what the sun had received and what the civilization had provided. No mass resistance to the system is recorded in any indigenous or Spanish source. That silence is not absence of evidence, it is the evidence. It tells us something specific and deeply uncomfortable about what a society can absorb when the framework that makes an institution legible is built into every layer of education, theology, family structure, and cosmological premise a person has ever been given.
Hernán Cortés arrived on the eastern coast in 1519. His letters to Charles V, the Cartas de Relación, describe the Templo Mayor, the skull rack, and the evidence of sacrifice with visible revulsion. The Spanish used this documentation as moral architecture for the conquest. The obsidian knife became the prosecution's primary exhibit. An entire civilization was placed on trial in the European imagination, convicted of savagery, and sentenced to replacement. The letters do not mention the Inquisition. At the precise moment Cortés was writing with outrage about Aztec ceremony, the Inquisition was operating across Spain and its territories with full institutional momentum. The auto da fe, the public ritual burning of those convicted of heresy, was a civic event. Crowds attended, officials presided. The theological logic was explicit. A soul consumed by earthly fire was potentially saved from eternal fire. Institutional killing, sacralized and publicly performed, conducted in the name of cosmic maintenance. The parallel is not equivalence, it is context. Two civilizations, both operating systems in which sanctioned death was theologically justified, publicly staged, and institutionally normalized. One had ships, steel, and a catastrophic biological advantage. That civilization wrote the history. It named the other one barbaric. It demolished the Templo Mayor stone by stone and used those stones to build the Metropolitan Cathedral of Mexico City, which still stands today, directly above the excavated ruins of what it replaced.
In 2015 and 2017, archaeologists from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, excavating beneath the streets of the capital, found the Huaytzampantli, the great skull rack that Spanish chroniclers had described, and that later historians had quietly categorized as probable exaggeration. It was not exaggeration. The excavation found skulls mortared together with lime into towers facing outward. Among them, women, children, not only warriors. Some skulls showed evidence of permanent placement, architectural integration. The rack was not a display case, it was a load-bearing structure, a building made of people holding something up. The excavation is ongoing. Modern Mexico City, 9 million people, sits directly above it. Every subway line, every colonial foundation, every building erected in the centuries since the conquest rests on a city that was raised and rebuilt using the same stones, over the same ground, above the same buried architecture. The obsidian knife sits now in a museum case, clean, behind glass, a placard in 3 languages. Tourists pass it and raise their phones. The Tzampantli was designed to be seen. It was architecture whose entire function was visibility, a civilization's public accounting of what sustained it, displayed where no one could avoid the knowledge. We built a city on top of it. We forgot it was there, and then we found it again, exactly where it had always been, beneath everything we thought we had replaced it with. The skulls face outward still. The city hums above them. Some things, it turns out, do not stop being load-bearing simply because we stop looking at them. If this documentary made you see history differently, if you want to keep pulling at the threads the textbooks leave untouched, subscribe and leave a comment below with the civilization you want us to investigate next. The past is not finished with us yet. Fade to black.